I've got a lot of grandbabies, like a lot. And when it comes to finding a gift for each of them, it could add up. But this year, while I was making my way through Walmart, I realized I don't have to spend a lot to get the gifts they'll love.
An OPI mini mani set. I'm gonna do so much nail art.
Oh, yeah! A Lego set. Might own a Walla water bottle.
Ooh, and that's just half of them.
Shop great gifts they're sure to love for $25 and under at Walmart.
This year, Santa's bringing the power of Energizer into his workshop.
Whoa, the Energizer Bunny's got so much power.
Wait, he's powered up all the toys. I think that means we're done for the year.
I love this bunny.
He's the hardest working helper the North Pole has ever seen. And he wants all your gifts to have the power of the #1 longest lasting AA battery. So this holiday season, stock up on Santa's and the elves' favorite battery, Energizer Ultimate Lithium.
The holidays are back at Starbucks, and there's so much to share. With classics like Caramel Brulee Latte, Peppermint Mocha, and Chestnut Praline Latte, we're celebrating everyone's flavor of festivity. Order yours in the app.
Hey, how you doing, guys? It's Mick Tully for the World Martial Arts Television Show. But it's the one and the only, the second best looking Irishman in the Midlands, and easily the best Irish martial artist in the Midlands. It's the one and only Ajan Guru Eddie Quinn. Eddie, thanks for coming on, man.
Evening. Great to see you again.
Hey, always good to see you, bro. Thanks, first of all, for jumping on here. Guys, I've got a little bit full disclosure here time now, right? So yesterday, I knew that Eddie's got an anniversary. So Eddie has an anniversary. I always know it's around this time of the year. The whole thing about Eddie's beginning in martial arts is like something out of a movie. Because nowadays, people who do martial arts, once you get into martial arts, I saw Conor McGregor, watch the UFC. Our generation, nearly all of us got in there through some sort of trauma. Childhood trauma, being bullied, something like that. But like Eddie, I can't go into it in any other way than this. Eddie, why did you get into martial arts?
Today is my Phoenix Day, by the way. The anniversary was yesterday, but the late Scott Caldwell,
yes,
he said that today's my Phoenix Day, and I quite like that. That's about, I'm going to say, 8 years ago or so. And today's the Phoenix Day. Today's my rebirth day.
So tell us, get straight into it.
Well, pretty much it was 40 years yesterday, and I'm a Birmingham boy, as you can probably tell by the accent. And I was drinking in my local pub, and cut a long story short, I had one of my friends came bursting into the pub saying that my girlfriend, she was an ex-girlfriend, was being attacked over at the bus stop. So it was me and my pal Alfie having a few pints. Me and Alfie ran across the road, and we were actually discussing this last night because we met up for a beer last night, the guy that was with me on the night. And there was about 3 guys, but there was two that were really up for it. One larger lad, one tall, skinny guy. Alfie went to the left, I went straight ahead, and I went for the guy that had a flick knife in his hand. And cut a long story short, it was a bit of to and fro in. What's the crack? What you're picking on the girls for? And basically, the range closed, and I got stabbed 6 times. I got stabbed in the right ventricle, in my heart, my liver, my bowel, my gallbladder, my head, and my thigh were all punctured in the attack. And that was pretty much the start of whatever I've been doing now the last 40 years.
Wow. And if you don't mind me asking, what did the police catch up with this guy, or what happened there?
I mean, cut a long story short, that he was arrested a few days later. It was like, back in the day, not many people got stabbed, if you like.
Yeah.
And it was like front page of the Birmingham Evening Mail, and there was a search for this guy. Anyway, he got found. It went to court. And he got 5 years. He was out in 2, and he done it again when he got out.
Leopards and spots, eh? It is a nightmare. It's like, as I've said before, it's like that's the harrowing part of the story, right? So the first time you hear that, you're like, oh my God. And I've said it to my friends. Said, I had a mate of mine who was stabbed 6 times in his heart and in his head, and they were like, and he survived. I said, survived? I said, mate, have you ever seen fucking Wolverine, mate? I said, he survived. He came back better. Like, what was the road back like?
I had no interest, Mick. I had no interest in martial arts whatsoever. I was just a young man, going out on a Friday night, Saturday night, going to work and having a few beers. I had no interest in martial arts whatsoever. But when I was discharged, it was literally on the medical report was that Mr. Quinn is young enough to get on with the rest of his life. That was it. And I had to go and see a heart specialist, and it was a guy called Mr. Abrahams, and he said to me, he went, "Have you ever thought about taking up a combat sport?" And this was 1985, and I said, "Well, I thought about it, Doc, because after what had happened." And he kind of like winked at me and went, "Suggest you do it."
Yeah.
And that's how it pretty much started. And again, you got to remember, we're back in '85, so we're going pre-internet.
Yeah.
So it's not as if you can just get your phone now and like Google, Silat in Solihull, or BJJ, or Muay Thai, or whatever you want. It's literally here.
Yeah.
I knew nothing about martial arts. I'd heard about kung fu. I'd heard about karate. I'd heard about judo. But that was about it.
So, where was the first place you started training then?
Yeah, I mean, my best pal Stevie, I used to work with. He had a mate whose cousin was teaching some martial art at a community centre, in another part of Birmingham. I had no idea what it was, so we turned up that day and went into this sports centre. Saw these guys in white suits. They were throwing each other around, and I thought, quite like this. Sat there, watched it, told him my story. I said, can you help me? And he went, yes. And it's a big shout out to a guy called Steve Maycock. He teaches Krav Maga now. Yeah. But it was not Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. It was Japanese Jiu-Jitsu. And that's how it all started. And me being me with my addictive personality, if you like, I just became completely obsessed. Because at the time, after getting stabbed, I was literally a broken, scared of life person. My old man had just died 6 months prior to me getting stabbed. Life was pretty shit, and I was just a shell of a kid. So obviously I was drinking more, I was eating shit, and I was looking for something, needed something, because I was discussing this with my pals last night, because I was being eaten away with wanting revenge. I was really just hell-bent on revenge.
Yeah. Well, if you don't mind me jumping in here, I've had this conversation a few times with people, because my dad used to always give me, God rest his soul, my dad used to say it to me all the time. He goes, "You're an awful man for holding a grudge, Michael." And he was one of the only people that ever called me Michael. And I said, "That's why I lift so many weights, Dad, because I have to carry around all these chips on my shoulder." And he was like, "Really?" I said, "Yeah, I said, "You're not just holding the grudge, you're carrying the grudge." And he went, "Why can't you let it go?" And I said, "Well, if I let it go, somewhere inside of me, I've said, well, it wasn't really that important." You know what I mean? It was like, it's not really, wasn't that bad. But the problem was, when I was in the middle of it, I was like, it was really that bad. It was horrible. And when people talk about revenge, it's like, well, are you gonna let this go? And like, I've famously, anyone who knows me knows this story. Guy who bullied me, saw him 4 times in my adult life, and guess what? Beat the shit out of him 4 times in my adult life. And it was like, Jeff Thompson said to me, he goes, "You really want to be able to get over this and let this go?" And I was like, "No, fuck that, man." And he goes, "Yeah, but the guy isn't even a threat anymore." And I said, "Somewhere deep here, in the hippocampus, it's still in there, mate. So I have to get it." So how did you deal with the revenge then, with these thoughts of revenge? how did you deal with that?
It was literally, I just started seeing my wife Sarah at the time, so we just started going kind of like going steady then, and then I was training, so I had Sarah, that was keeping me grounded, and also because I didn't want the shame on my family for me to be a murderer.
Yeah.
Because I was intent on doing the two of them.
Yeah.
I had it all planned what I was going to do.
Yeah, but it's that thing. It's like when people say, yeah, but I just bumped in. No, there was never going to be a bumping in. I'd make it look like we bumped into each other, but I'll have been going in there, proper Sun Tzu level shit,
Yeah.
So
yeah.
How did you?
Basically, it was literally just having Sarah there as someone that was grounding me, not having the shame of being a murderer, to my mom, and obviously Dad had just died as well. So me being stabbed 6 months later, and then me doing something ridiculous, and then just getting involved in martial arts. And it was like I was overweight, like I said, I was drinking too much, I was eating shit, and I just started to train. And in the first, I'm going to say 6 months, I'd lost like 4 stone.
Wow.
I'd gone from like 15 stone to 11 stone. I was I was really fit, and I was so into what I was doing.
Yeah.
And then obviously me being me, then it's like, because I'm just a street kid.
Yeah.
I started to realise that as much as I was loving the learning, a traditional art, I still teach a traditional art now, not knocking it at all. But, you're not barefoot on the street. You don't bow on the street. I knew that there was areas. And if I'm honest with you, even though I've been training for years then, I was still scared.
Yeah. No one wants to admit that.
I was still scared.
Yeah.
And then obviously it was back in the day, it was frowned on to cross train, as you know. You had to stick in that particular style. If you were going elsewhere, it was really frowned on. But in those days, then all that was available was books. So I used to work around the corner from the old Geeko Cymac shop on the Stratford Road in Sparkhill.
Yeah.
So I used to go. Me and Stevie used to go there in our lunch breaks, and I'd go and buy a book. And I started to get in all the Danny Santo books, everything else, and started to basically research different arts, because by then it was like, once I'd started, it was like I wanted to be this all-round martial artist that could fight standing up, that could fight on the ground, could fight with a weapon and without a weapon.
Well, you see,
the first base art wasn't giving me that, because it was just a little bit too clean.
Yeah, well, you see, this has got me onto something, because you said you were scared, right? So I remember, I've got a couple of mad theories. You've heard most of them. So it's like, there's nothing scarier in the world than a hungry blue belt at Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, or a hungry brown belt back in the day at karate, right? So I remember being a brown belt at karate, and I had all these techniques, and I could bash pretty much. Realistically, I've got to give a shout out to my old karate sensei, Andy Margaret, right? So Andy Margaret, I was known as Mad Mick Tully, and everyone was shit scared of me when we'd spar. But then none of them realised that I was way more scared of them than they were of me. I was overcompensating with the craziness, which I found out years later is a coping mechanism for a lot of scared people. Because what you do is it's like, fuck with me, I'm a madman. And then they're like, why do you do that? Because I'm so scared of fighting you. That was it, right? So you touched on a few things there that I'm going to get you in a minute on, right? But first of all, what was it that scared you? Was it the fact that you now had the skill level to be able to defend yourself, or was it the fact that you didn't have enough?
I didn't have enough.
Right.
I didn't have enough. Obviously, learning the art. And yes, I could put a wristy-twisty wrist lock on you.
Yeah.
If you were compliant. Yes, I could throw you if you were compliant. but I realised that I still couldn't punch my way out of a paper bag. And that's when, I'd read an article in Combat or whatever was around at the time. And, Danny Santo was talking about, Muay Thai is the best striking art, great athletes. You get used to stand-up grappling too, you get used to getting hit, and that was what I wanted. I wanted to be able to hit you with any part of me, knowing that I could drop you and stop you with that first shot.
Well, do you know what? This is the thing, right? So I was trying to figure out where we first. I know that we first met through.
I know where we first met
at a martial arts show.
We met in the car going to the show in Wales.
We did.
That was our first meeting.
The super seminar, right? So
that was the one.
You were just breaking out the approach at the time, as I recall.
Yeah, that was my first approach seminar.
And I turned around to Al and I went, "You see that? That's what those original JKD boys think they're doing." And you would go in, you went an angle 1 and you went an angle 2 on the approach. Yeah. And you went, first one's there. If they don't get up the hands, I'm going to knock their teeth out. And he goes, if they do get the hands up, fuck it. They get the number 2. They get the hammer. And you were crushing the hammer through. Well, you look where the approach is taking you. For the guys that don't know anything about this, Eddie, explain what the approach system is and how you came up with it.
The approach was basically, the approach is 16 years old now. I've been training with my teacher for 31 years now, and what he tends to do, Guru Chris Parker, and he tends to give me a weapon of the year, and he'll give me a specific weapon to work on. And one day I was round at the house training, and he said he got out these Golox machetes, and he said, "I suggest you get yourself a pair of these and really, really work them." And he said, what you'll find is that your personality will come out by you using these weapons. Anyway, got the weapons, training with the weapons. It was great, throwing these real big, large, forehand, backhand strikes with the Galak, with the machete. And then started to realise that in my own training, I was doing these massive, big forehand and backhand strikes. And I was teaching my Muay Thai class at the time. And for some reason, it hadn't even had a name then. I stopped my Muay Thai class. I went, guys, I want to show you this. And I was showing the class these big forehand and backhand strikes. And again, if you can make it work against Thai boxers, you can pretty much make it work against anybody, really.
Yeah.
And you can see the guys that the Thai boxers were really getting into it. Cut long story short, that was the Thursday. On the Sunday, I went to see Chris, and I told him about what had happened in class. And he looked at me and he went, "That's brilliant. Eddie Quinn's the approach." And that was how it started. It literally started from there. And, throughout my life, I've always been one of those guys that's had an idea, but, I've always taught myself out of it. But for some reason, it just felt right. I mean, if I was going to give it a name, we'd still be waiting for a name 16 years down the line, Mick,
Yeah.
But it was like Eddie Quinn's the approach. And it was like, yeah, I love it. And cut long story short, we got Richie Grannon. Remember Richie Grannon? Street Fight Secrets.
Mate, Richie Grannon is huge on YouTube now.
I know he is. I know. I've been told. But anyway, I contacted Richie Grannon, and I said, "Can you come and film the approach? This material I've been working on." And he comes to Solihull. We hired the community centre up the road, and it was me, Super Nige, and another one of my students. And we basically just, I was as literally all this stuff was coming out of me, and filmed it. I could see Richie Grannon actually. He was like peering over the camera, going, "What the fuck's this?" Literally. And he'd done a pilot film. He gave me the material back. Took it to Chris to watch, and we thought that it should be filmed. The material was good, but it should have just been filmed now correctly. It's just like a pilot film.
Yeah.
So we went to Chris and John. They just got back from Edinburgh because they filmed one of Guru Danny Santo's one of his video series.
Yes,
The one
I
with Eric
remember it.
Paulson and Ricky.
Yeah, I remember it. Yeah,
Chris and John filmed that.
Oh, I didn't know that.
John,
yeah.
John Tutley was one of Chris's students, and he had had all the film kit. So we went to his house and literally filmed the first 3 volumes of The Approach. Contacted Bob Sykes, put an advert in MAI, and strangely enough, people were starting to buy. I was unknown really. People were starting to buy the DVDs, and more and more people were buying them. 3 DVDs turned into 6, 6 turned into 8. Sold the DVDs all over the world, and then people were contacting me to go and teach seminars all over the world. Like, fuck me. Because from just taking some kind of action and not talking myself out of it, telling myself that I'm not good enough.
Well, you see, this is the thing. It was when we did that super seminar, it was really funny because, I'll be telling you, I think I might have told you this when I was working around your house, or when me and you have hung out together. And one of the things I've always loved about it, from the minute I met you, I loved you. Right, you got to, for guys who are watching this now, it's me and Eddie. We meet up a couple of times a year, go see the Dropkick Murphys together. Every time we talk to each other, we always say the same thing: we're going to have to go out. We're going to have a few beers around Digbeth, just turn into old Irish guys. And literally, I roll around the floor with your son at Jiu-Jitsu. By the way, Jake's a monster, mate. I tell you. I had an absolute joy last time I was with him. He's doing well. Last time I trained with him, he was a monster. He was really, really good. But the one of the things I've always loved about you is like your honesty. But like when you first started off and you were delivering the approach, your delivery was almost visceral. You were the first person I ever saw that actually swore and berated people in the seminar if they weren't putting enough into it. And you're really good at that NLP of creating that mindset of going, you say, that isn't going to work. Yeah, you got to destroy. And then like the classic, which I always love from you, and whether or not you know that I picked up on this or not, when you turn around and go, that you don't think this is important? Go check this T-shirt out, and then what you do is rip the T-shirt off. You go, see that that's what's going to happen. That's what's going to happen to you. And you go, oh my god. And the way that you delivered it, you were the first person that I saw deliver martial arts with the no BS way of, you're reliant on that. If that doesn't work, you're going to be fucked. And like I remember you using those terms like in a crowded room, and they were all, especially some of these proper pajama boys, they were like that going, oh, this is a bit too real for me. And you were like, I'm going to smash his fucking teeth out. And you're like, what the hell?
Yeah, there's a couple of things there though, Mick. It's, I've been there and I wear the T-shirt, and I wear the T-shirt 24 hours a day till the day I die.
Yeah.
I've tasted violence.
Yeah.
I've been, I'm a kid from the streets. I know what it's like. I said to you, when we first started the chat a few minutes ago, it was like, I loved going into that dojo and bowing and doing everything, traditionally, but I realized that it was just too clean.
Yeah.
And personally, because, I've had a few kick-ins in my time, and I've had kick-ins by more than one person.
Mm.
I years ago when I was like 16, 17, I got beaten up walking through Birmingham, just been to a concert, cutting through an alleyway, and I got jumped by about 4 or 5 guys, and they literally just kicked the shit out of me, stomped all over me, hit me with a chair leg, bust my head open. While you're down, while I'm down on the ground there, you're getting stomped on, you die on the ground.
Mm. Yeah.
So personally speaking, I want to be able to hit that person who's in front of me as hard as I can, so I can either escape or deal with his mate.
Yeah.
I can't fanny around, doing an 8-move combination. I need to be able to take that person out so I can get home safe. or deal with his mates.
Yeah, but you see, this is the thing, right? So, and I'd like your take on this, because we're the similar age.
I got one more thing as well. So
tell me. Go ahead.
You was on about the pajama boys. I mean, I don't call them pajama boys at all. But the thing is this, that the way that I taught the approach, I don't learn quickly. I have to break things down simple in my head.
Yeah.
So all of these slashing, stabbing movements where the approach came from, I started to relate the same movements to throwing.
Yeah.
So a forehand shot, that would be like throwing a ball.
Yeah.
And the foot would be like walking. The backhand strike, so like a backhand chop, I'd be going, if you got a frisbee in your hand, it's the same as skimming a frisbee. So you got me going now. Well, if you can throw a ball and you can move your feet as in walk and you can throw a frisbee, it's not very sexy, is it? And you can do the approach, right?
Yeah.
Right. But this is the bit that when I do a course and I've got a beginner who comes, just say, for instance, I've got someone who's never trained before, and then you've got somebody who's been training for 10, 20, 30 years in a traditional art. And then by the end of that course, because of the way that I teach it and I relate it to things that the body does natural, throwing, we can all throw a bloody ball.
Yeah.
By the end of that 5 hours, 3 hours, excuse me, you can't tell the difference. You can't tell the difference between the beginner or the person who's been training all of that amount of time. And that is what I think. That is why that's what I've always said. The approach really didn't take off in the martial arts world. Things that I got kind of like ridiculed with on certain platforms, when I've gone and taught elite military, it's gone in their syllabus.
Yeah.
So people were taking the piss out of. I went and taught the Royal Marines a couple of years ago. They're close combat trainers, and members of the US Marines were there as well. They're combat trainers. Straight away, that went in their syllabus.
Yeah, but you see, this is the thing, right? So when I said pajama boys, right? So I've said this a few times. People go, what are you saying? Martial arts, traditional martial arts, you don't rate it? And I'm like, what? You're talking like Steve Lowe, Gavin Mulholland, John Johnson, you know what I mean? Let's say Simon Oliver, Terry O'Neill.
Guys that would punch a hole through you.
Mate, trust me, they would do Tai Chi and they do that. And then again, like we got to touch on this. It's like Chris Parker, right? I'll tell you now, Chris Parker is one of 5 men that I've said that I've stood in front of, and the minute he's put his hands on me, I've gone like this. I don't want to sound big-headed. So that's what it feels like when you're in front of me then. Because, you know, when they put the balls on you and you just go, shit, I have no business being here. It's just guys who know what they're doing. Their movement is just so sublime. It's unreal. And that, like, there's, with the traditional arts, like, it's funny what you said. This is, I want to dig in on this one a little bit, where you were saying, you know, the piss, some guys, they take the piss out of you because they go, well, that wouldn't work. This wouldn't work. And you go, yeah, but what they're doing is they're embellishing stuff. As you said earlier, if you can throw a ball, you can walk, and you can throw a frisbee, you can do the approach. Unfortunately, the human mindset is always the same. If it isn't difficult, then there's no value. If it's free, there's no value. And then you go, no, you don't understand. An arm bar is an arm bar. Yeah, like, oh, you can show me the coolest footlock in the world, and I'll just go, look, I'll tell you what, if I put my arm across your neck, right, and I get him that head and arm choke, I'll choke out 99% of the population. Easy. Why? Because guess what? There's certain stuff like a wheel, like a circle, like a triangle, that are just universal truths, and they can't be improved upon, right? And it's a simplicity thing that, you, like when we're talking about the approach, it's funny because I've thought a lot about this. Well, like, you know, because I've wanted to get you for ages, because we did an audio years ago, audio podcast on mixed martial arts, and I wanted to get you back because at the time the approach was just starting to take off, and you were still aiming it towards the martial arts world, right? And it was like you said, it didn't really go there, because guess what? Martial artists don't really fight. Yeah, but people who actually had to do it, they were like, what? So a front hand and a backhand, walking forwards, walking backwards, learning the footwork. And then when I saw you expand it out And it was really funny because I saw you expanding out your approach system. And then I saw you contract it literally about 6 months after you started expanding it. Because it was funny to watch you do it. Because you went like this is going to be huge. And you went, no, it's enough. It's a bit like the Roman Empire with you. You expanded it, went, no, if it gets too big, I won't be able to control it because it isn't what I'm about, right? So you mentioned Chris Parker. You mentioned that the approach came from Silat, right? So if I can find it, I'll get the picture. I'm going to send it to Will, and we'll tag this in, right? There is a great picture of you back in the early JKD days, and you look like you've just come out of a rave. You got long hair, and I don't know if you were training with Vunak or Rick Young, but it was one of those. It was one of the JKD boys back in the early days, right? How did you jump from that JKD group to finding Chris and then staying with Chris, which you have done now for 31 years?
I've never trained Jeet Kune Do, Mick.
Yeah, but but I mean, there's a picture of you at a seminar. Is it on a Vunak seminar or something with long hair?
I've done the Vunak seminar, yeah. I mean, like I said, I was once I started getting obsessed and started to get focused and started to leave all that wanting to, that eaten away by revenge.
Yes.
Training Japanese Jiu-Jitsu, then starting to train Muay Thai, then realised that I couldn't carry on with the Jiu-Jitsu. It was just doing that. It wasn't doing that. It was doing that. Starting to train Muay Thai, then saying to you that I still felt scared.
Yeah.
Not so much with the Muay Thai, but because of what happened to me with blades, I was still petrified of blades. And then I started to research arts that studied, that basically studied blade weapons-based arts. So, of course, back in the day, it was reading Guru Daniel Santo's books about, Filipino screamer. And then that word Silat came up a few times. I was like, what's this Silat? Started training. Bob Spore done a little bit of a screamer, so he gave me a little bit of a taster, with the, angle 1, angle 2, Abanico, stuff like that. Then I started training with a guy in Nottingham called Martin Smith. Martin Smith was a Latosa. Latosa Martin, I started training with him, and I think I had to hit my fear, because otherwise I'd be running away from it. I had to research arts that went in depth with blades, and at the time the two main arts were Filipino martial arts and Silat that I knew of, but Silat kept on creeping up. Cut long story short, I'd done all the seminar circuits. Anybody that was doing a seminar I used to go to, I wanted to be Rick Young. Rick Young, has always been, a massive, massive inspiration to me. Just to see that guy, and even though we studied different arts, he was a guy that I was just in awe of, and I used to get Rick down every few months to do a seminar for me. Advertise it in MAI or Combat Magazine. Jeff Thompson used to come to my house and do a private with Rick while Rick was down. So I was doing all the seminars, and then I went to a Guru Daniel Santo seminar at Bob's place in London at the old Hoxton Square.
Space. Oh, that's at the square.
I went there.
Oh yeah,
Hoxton Square, and that's when I literally first saw Silat. And I was so fascinated with not so much what was going on upstairs, but what was going on the low line.
Yes.
The way that Guru Dan would literally close the range, and then the lower leg game going on.
Yeah.
And then to actually feel it, a couple of years later from Guru to Chris, it was just something that I needed to learn. And I said to my wife, I come back, and I said, do you fancy going to Indonesia? This was 1993.
Wow.
And so she said, we went to Bali. So we went to Hong Kong, we went to Singapore, and we had a week in Bali. And while I was in Bali, I was pestering everybody, all the locals, to try and find someone, if they could, someone to teach me Silat. And all I ever got was a smile.
Yeah.
That was literally it. I'd say, and even now, I mean, I was in Borneo about 5 years ago, and one of the guys there, because I'm still pretty good shape for my age, and I was in the pool, and one of the guys who worked for the hotel says, what do you do? I said, well, I teach martial arts in the UK. What martial arts do you teach? And I said, I teach Muay Thai and I teach Silat. And it was like, you could see it was like very unusual for a white Western guy to be studying, an art that's from that area. So even 5 years ago, so back in the day, 1993, it was pretty unheard of. So every time I was asking about Silat, it was just like I got a smile, and I ended up just buying a book by Edward Frey about the Chris. That was all I got. Came back with my towel between my legs. Cut a long story short, Bob Spoor was writing for Combat Magazine, and Rick Young was at Castle Donington doing a seminar. Me and Bob went up to Castle Donington to see Rick, and Bob was going to interview Rick. And Chris Parker walked through the door with his wife. And I'd heard that Chris was a Silat teacher. I'd seen his video Closing the Gap.
Yes.
I went over to Chris. I said, I loved your video. Can I train with you? So I flew to Indonesia to find a Silat guru. And I found him 40 miles up the road in Castle Donington. That was how it started.
Well, you see,
in those days, the way that Chris was showing the art was it looked more like Filipino empty hands than it did Silat.
Yeah,
he wasn't showing that, so you didn't see any of the traditional kind of way of Silat. It was more kind of FMA. And that's literally how it started in 1993.
Well, you see, it's so funny because in 1993, I was in Germany, and I remember, do you remember there was at the time, there was combat, traditional karate, MMA came out, and then there was Fighters magazine. Do you remember?
Fighters.
Yeah, so Fighters magazine was out, and then Terry O'Neill had like his Fighting Arts magazine as well.
That was brilliant, wasn't it?
That was, out of all of them, Terry's was the best, I think. Chris wrote a series of articles, and I want to say it was called the Parker Principle, but I'm not sure. I think I've made that bit up. But Chris was there, and like, if you've never trained with him, you guys who are watching this, you're missing out, because the guy's a visionary, and he is one of those characters that, I'm trying to think of the best way of putting this. If there's anything about Chris, he's just an ordinary looking man. Where we talk about, when you see him, it's, don't judge a book by its cover. But with Chris, you see him, and he just looks like a normal guy. And then you see him move, and you go, oh my God, that's the first one. And then if you feel him, so if you're lucky enough to ever be in a situation where he's just going to demonstrate once, yourself, like this is leading me to the question. First time you trained with Chris and he put his hands on you, right? And I'm not saying that he would have dropped 100% on you by any stretch of the imagination, but just when you got that first taste of that energy that he's got, it had to have blown your mind.
I've never met a man that can move his body the way that he can move his body.
Yeah.
I mean, this is no bullshit. I'm going to see him tomorrow for a lesson, and I can still feel the adrenaline now. 31 years ago, that I've had.
Really?
Even though I've been a student for 31 years, I can still feel the adrenaline starting now as we're talking. Never met a man that can move his body. He can move his body more economical than anyone that I've ever met.
Yeah.
And as obviously, as he's 67 now. And as we're aging, I think that's very important that to be able to move that way and still lead by example. Because even now at 67, he's still moving as good as he did when I first met him as a young man. I was in my 20s; he was in his 30s.
Well, you see, this is the thing, right? I went up and I did some work. You hooked me up with Chris when did some plastering for him. And I said to Chris, and it's bad because I need to go up and see him again, because as much as it was great to do the plastering and as much as it was good to do some training with him, what I just really enjoyed was just being in his company and spending time with him, sitting down, having a beer afterwards, just talking about life, the universe and everything. But he showed me a beset, so a sweep that he was doing, right, out of Silat. And I shit you not, I've said this to people and they look at me and they like, the only way I can explain it is, it's the only other person that's ever done it to me that made me feel the same was Mal Morney, where they feel, you know, like when they do the beset and the way that you get spun, it's, you feel like they've somehow teleported 3 foot on the other side of your body when they switch it. And the thing is, I know that I'm the guy getting moved, but it was so slick the way that Chris did it. I was like, how the fuck have you got over there? And I couldn't work out how he did it.
I think what you got to remember is this, that he's been training in the art since 1976.
Wow. Yeah, you said you've hit the nail on the head. It's like you said earlier about as we're getting older and longevity in the art. And if you've noticed that with our chat, we've steered away from the revenge, the fighting, the prowess, because me and you were talking online and you were talking about yoga and how it's changed your life and how you really, really enjoy it. And I'm now looking for a more holistic approach, because I think what I've done for the last 13, 14 years in jiu-jitsu is just risked my body and got injured a lot, when mentally I was already tough. And physically, I was pretty tough too. And now at 55...
And especially if we want to keep on training, you know, for longevity.
Well, this is the thing. It's the holistic approach.
You have to adapt. You've got no choice but to adapt. Otherwise, you're going to not be able to train. And for me, over the past 40 years, training's always been that thing that's always kept my head together and kept me on that straight and narrow path. So I have to, you know, like I said, I need simple. So, you know, as a teacher, I'm always trying to find ways where I can teach better.
Yeah.
And look for the approach example, throw a ball, skim a frisbee, move your feet, walk. You can do that, right? And then we can make it combative. You know, groundwork, you know, look at Silat groundwork and you look at some of the, you know, the likes of Alvin who moves on the ground, wonderful. I can't do that.
Yeah.
You know, what I've been having to do is I've been incorporating Swiss ball training on the ground in my Silat training on the ground. It's been absolutely groundbreaking.
Right.
Making Silat shapes, ground shapes, but using the ball to take the load off.
Yeah.
When I teach Lanka footwork, I've been using, you know, visual aids like, you know, cones to step to.
Yeah,
really, I do more stretching and mobility work now than I do martial arts.
Really?
Yeah, and I'm feeling lighter. I'm 59 in a couple of months, but I'm feeling lighter. I'm feeling more aligned. My body's moving better, and I'm making sure that, you know, before I do anything, that I'm safe. And I'm in alignment. So I'm not just like a bull at a gate. I've always been that bull at a gate, straight in, boom, and fuck myself up. But at this stage of my life now, I want to keep on training until I'm not here anymore physically. I want to be able to do that in a way that I'm not going to damage my body.
Well, it's funny you said that, because one of the things I've been looking at it a lot recently, because I want to say from around the age of 35 to about probably 50, 51. That was where I felt as badass. I don't think when you're younger, you fool yourself into believing you're a badass, right? And then around 35, it sort of just all started to click together. And then with the jiu-jitsu, apart from any injuries, I felt great. And one of the things I used to pride myself on was, I used to say it to LPs all the time, because I says, I need to warm up a little bit, the lower back's tight and all this. And I said, "No, man, fuck that." And he went, "What?" I said, "Dude, I'm ready to go. Drop of a hat." And he said, "What?" And I went, "Watch." And he was like, "We'd be there." And I said, "Let's roll now." He went, "Yeah, but don't you need to warm up?" I said, "We're going to warm up on the street." And I think I had it as a mindset more than anything. Yeah.
I get that.
Yeah. You understand what I mean? And that's one of the things I always say this to Rick Fay when I see him now, because Rick kills me, because Rick Fay's Chris Parker. Your Chris Parker is my Rick Fay, right? So it's that whole, you know that old, like, as I always say, the great thing about Terry Barnett is the soul. If I had to say that what is the soul of my martial arts and my training, all comes from Terry, because he's just such a lovely guy. I love him to death. But then Rick Fay's the guy that, he's the "I told you so" guy. That when you're training, it's like, well, you can do that, Mick. But this, and Rick, everything I told him last time we were training, I went, "Do you know what kills me about you, Rick?" And he went, "What?" I said, "Everything you told me has come to fruition." And he went, "What?" I said, "You told me that I wasn't always going to be that guy." And he goes, "You weren't that guy about 2 years ago, but you wouldn't accept it, would you?" And I went, "Exactly." And Rick was like, "Yeah, you always think you still got that shot." And on a good day, I still have it, but not as often as I used to. 9 out of 10 times. And that's leading me on to now what advice you would give. Because if you've been in martial arts like we have our whole lives, yeah, it's hard to reconcile the fact that the one enemy that will always beat you is Father Time, right? So the advice I want is like twofold. First, guys who have been training long enough, just how to get your head around the ego part. The second part is, we're now seeing guys our age who have never done anything apart from a bit of Saturday football or Sunday league football, getting into especially jiu-jitsu.
Yeah.
And then, I don't know about you, but I'm seeing a hell of a lot of injuries and guys going in and maybe getting to blue belt and not getting any further. So advice for the older martial artist, new or for a lifetime guy.
Personally, I've crossed my arms here. I've folded my arms. I'm not being defensive. Really, I don't think there's enough. I don't think there's enough people talking about quality teaching. And you've got all different kind of like Silat, organizations, but for some reason, Guru Chris, he was the man that I wanted to learn from. The way that he taught me worked for me, because at the end of the day, all learning is bespoke, isn't it? All the best learning is bespoke. So for me personally, it's trying to find a teacher that is going to guide you in the best way. Rather than just going, well, yeah, okay, go to a Muay Thai class or go to a boxing class or go and do BJJ. I really do believe that it is the teacher that is the most important part of that. I've heard Chris speak about it before, that he's on about Bapak Idris, his teacher. He said even if he was teaching knitting, he'd have been his student. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think it's a really difficult one. It's a really hard question to answer, because I think it all comes down to who you have as a guide and someone that's going to look after you and care for you. I've got a couple of ebooks that I started writing an autobiography about 5 years ago. Wrote about 20,000 words, and then I stopped. I thought, I can't do this, and I kept on going back to it. And then taught myself out of it again. But the last 2 months, I've actually sat down and I wrote 2 ebooks about teaching. I was more comfortable talking about that area than I was talking about myself. And I've worked it out now that I've taught over 22,000 classes.
Wow!
In the last 26 years, 22,000 classes. And I think from having drunks turn up to your class that want to fight, to teaching a 4-year-old how the difference between the left and right. I think it all boils down to teaching. Nobody speaks about, you might see all the marketing stuff on Facebook, to get students, how to get 30 new signups. But if you're teaching shit, they're going to leave.
Yeah.
You've got to learn to teach. You've got to learn how to teach, to be a great teacher, to teach fun classes where people feel safe. You've got to realize that, there's a lot of people like me who have had trauma, massive trauma, and they come into your school for the first time. We don't realize how much bollocks it's taken for that student to walk into your doors for the first time. They could be a victim of, domestic abuse. They could have been raped. They could have been stabbed. They could have had this, that, and the other. And it's how you can then make them feel welcome as a student and guide them, rather than, just another number to take the money off. Getting 30 new students come through your door this week. By the end of the month, they're fucked off anyway, because you're teaching shit. And then, but because you've got that hamster wheel of getting people in, getting the money, then they leave. What about becoming a great teacher where they don't leave? Obviously, a lot of students leave in the end, but my retention rates, and I haven't advertised. I've been teaching children now for 26 years. Jake's in the business, my son's in the business with me. We don't advertise. We're full because we care and we teach great classes.
Yeah, but you see, this is the thing. Like, for the guys who are watching, what is the name of your classes? This is what I like.
Right. Cut a long story short, when I first started teaching way back in '98, my son Jake was 2, and before that, I had no inclination to teach kids. Then Jake came along, and I wanted to be able to keep my own child safe. Hence the name Child Safe Martial Arts. And so that's how it all started.
Yeah, but you see, this is the thing, right? The first time I ever saw that, I saw it on a T-shirt, and I was like, I looked at it, and it was really funny because I had that moment where, as a martial artist, so guys who didn't see that, I just shook my head in disbelief. Right. So what it was, 9 times out of 10, back in those days, it was like they sensationalized the martial arts a little bit, Cobra Kai, Eagle Fang Karate, whatever you want to call it, right? And then I looked at it and I was like, child safe martial arts. And then I thought, and shame on me, I looked at it for a second and I was like, they're just teaching children how to defend themselves. And I was like, Mick, what sort of animal are you that you think that children should be taught how to attack? And it got me really thinking immediately, because I was like going, now, if I wanted my children to learn martial arts, nothing says that my child's going to be safer more than going to a school that's called Child Safe Martial Arts. It says exactly what it does on the tin. And you were the first, if you want to know the truth, you're the first and the only one I've ever seen. So I've seen kid-friendly. I don't really like the term, because I've got a couple of friends of mine who run what some people would probably denigrate as a Mac dojo. So the thing is, there's certain things, and I'm not knocking anyone, right? If you're doing kids' birthday parties and you're making a fortune, more power to your elbow, right? But it's not martial arts. Just you're a daycare center. But and I'm not knocking you for it either, because you're not going to have to plaster a kitchen tomorrow. I will, but having said that, I enjoy plastering. But anyway, the martial arts part, the way that you did it, and it is always, it's something I've always admired about you, Ed, because I remember years ago,
I wanted to be that person that I needed when I was a kid.
You said this to me, because me and you have had this convo before, where it was like, I remember saying to Terry Barnett, I really wanted to be your friend. I wanted to be your student when I was in my 20s. And he said, what were you like when you were in your 20s? That's a bit of a dickhead, really. And he went like, he goes, well, I don't think I would have liked you, Mick. And I was like, really? He goes, yeah, I wouldn't have had you as a student then, because we met at exactly the right time. And the thing is, as I said, with you, what made me smile was, we were at I want to say it was a Seni. It was at the NEC, and we literally just bumped into each other at the show. And you were there, and it was you and what's his second name? Pete, Thai boxer, used to train with you.
Pete Ashford, Pete the Tough.
Pete the Tough, yeah, Pete Ashford, right? And now, for the guys who are watching this, you won't believe this, right? There was a guy there, and do you remember he came over from America and he had that combat station? I do. Do you remember it?
Yes.
And it was really funny because you'd only just started doing the approach, and you went up and you went boom, boom, and you broke the top part of it, right? And the guy was like, going, oh, and then Pete came over and goes, let's have a go. Now, I'll tell you right now, I've never seen two humans hit an inanimate object harder in my fucking life than these two. Because Pete, do you remember Pete kicked it and then it came off because it was moored to the ground, and he broke it with a Thai kick. And I remember looking at it and going, I do Thai boxing, but it doesn't look anything like that. Like, it doesn't look anything like that.
He's still training Muay Thai now, you know, more than ever. And he's in his 50s now.
Yeah. Oh, man.
He's 50 now, yeah.
Pete's a tough kid, man. But like, this is the thing which leads me onto it, right? And I'm gonna bring it all together in a nice, neat bow, right? So, physically, Eddie, if you're one of a handful of men that I know that if you wanted to BS it, like pull a skull with a fucking dagger through its mouth and a snake through its eye and call it, you know, like Death Valley martial arts, right? I know that you could sell that to people, right? And you've never done that. You've gone completely the opposite way. There's three things which I know that you got Kid Safe, you got the approach, and then you got Silat Fitra, right? And all three of those things, I look at them and you go, they just look like nice martial arts, right? And you could sell that, right? So that's more power to you, and it speaks volumes about the person you are. And the way that I'm going to bring it all the way around is you were driven by revenge, right? So if a bloke was driven by revenge as much as you were, how come you haven't got Death Valley martial arts with the skull and the dagger in its mouth and the snake going through? Why is it that you've got this nice program that you could teach to someone in 5 hours and they'll come out of it feeling okay? You've got Silat Fitra, which is for more seasoned martial artists or beginners to learn to go into a whole new world. And then you've got the kids thing, right? So you've got all of these things that are so non-revenge based, or that, you know, that wouldn't be what would spring to my mind if I see that, right? So you've got all of those. Now, here's my big question. 40 years ago yesterday, if you'd have been in the Swan at Yardley and you hadn't drank that Castlemaine and gone outside, where do you think you'd be today?
I think I'd have been on a building site somewhere.
I'm on the building site, but you know what I mean? It's like, it's that sliding doors moment, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's the one.
We spoke about this last night, you know, me and Alfie, and he went, you went that way, I went that way. You took the guy with a knife, I took the guy with he had a sock with snooker balls in or something. If we'd have gone that way,
yeah,
you know, and we spoke last night, and he said, you know, I still feel guilty about you that night and you getting stabbed. And I said to him, I went, mate, in those days, I had a little bit more meat on me than you. If you'd have got stabbed, the chances are I would have killed you. And I said, you know, I took the magic beans from that event and turned it into something positive. Yeah. And it's been the making of me. Everything I've done ever since has been as a result of someone trying to kill me that night.
Yeah.
My revenge has been success. My revenge is living a great life. My revenge is being surrounded by beautiful people, having a great family.
Well, this is the thing, right? I put it on your Facebook yesterday. So it's Ryan Holiday, who's one of my favourite guys. He's if you haven't got it, right, this is a freebie. I would love to.
I saw it. I watched it this morning.
Yeah, Stoic a Day, right? So Ryan Holiday is one of the leading authorities on Stoicism, but he basically makes it more palatable now for today's market, right? And it was so funny because I went to see Gladiator 2. Shout out to Lee Charles. You look great in there as Slovak, but you got killed. So you know what I mean. I don't think you'll be back for Gladiator 3, Lee. Don't hate to ruin the spoiler there for you, mate. But I saw it, and there was a great line in it from Marcus Aurelius, which is the greatest revenge is to be unlike the person who did you the harm, right? And when I was at the cinema, I saw that and I immediately thought of you because I knew that your anniversary was coming up. Because I actually sent you a message, didn't I? I said, don't know if I should say this, but congratulations on your anniversary, ? Because I know it's one. But it's like you are one of I've said this before, mate. You're one of the only guys I've ever met in martial arts that every single thing about you I like. You know what I mean? The way you conduct yourself, just as a dad, as a husband, as a person. Like myself, I remember the first time I went round to your house and God rest his soul, Bookman, what a dog that fella was, right? And you were like, are you okay with dogs? And I was like, Eddie, I'm great with all dogs. Oh, no. Yeah, boy. Yes. But it was like, are you okay with dogs? And I'm like, mate, I haven't met a dog yet that I've never liked, right? And I've never met a person where a dog goes, nah, this guy's a bit of a rat. And I always take the dog's advice. If I see the dog and the dog doesn't like the human, pretty good chance I'm not going to like the human as well. But, dude, I mean this from the bottom of my heart, mate. From the minute I met you, you've always just brought joy to my life. Even when you were killing me at Jiu-Jitsu back in the day, mate. You know what I mean? Even in those days. But Eddie, thanks. Right, the reason I'm wrapping it up now, guys, are you watching this? Right now, it's 16:20 on a Sunday night, and I don't want to ruin Eddie's tough guy rep. But in about 15 minutes, Eddie, the results show is on for Strictly, old mate. And if there's one thing I know about you, you like Muay Thai, but you like those sequin shirts nearly as much.
Yeah. But do you know why I like Strictly?
Do
you know why I like Strictly? Two things. I love watching a dancer because they learn how to move all of their bodies. And that's how we should move as a martial artist. But also I love the fact how a professional can get a beginner to a very high standard very quickly.
Well, this is it, right? We were going to wrap up on this, but I'm watching this at the moment. And again, you know, these, it's so Jeet Kune Do. It's unreal. It's like using limitation as no limitation. And you look at Chris, right, the blind guy. He's unbelievable. And it's like Annie said, as unbelievable as he is, how good is his teacher to be able to teach him like that? And then the other girl who's got the cochlear implant, who's deaf. I watched this last night, and I swear to God, I looked at it and I just couldn't believe what I was seeing. It was like not it's a professional yada. I just looked at it and I went, I get why people think dance is cool now. Because I didn't know what I saw. All I knew it was magic. That's all I know. And the other one as well is I know that Eddie really loves Strictly because I caught him coming back from Strictly on the train once. Yeah, me and the boys were going for a day out, me and my sons, going over to Birmingham. And this is where I always get a little bit emotional. When I go over to Birmingham, I always think of my dad because as my dad once said to me, he said his happiest days were in Erdington. And I was like, but Dad, that was before you were married to Mum and we weren't there. And he went, yeah, that's why they were the happiest days of my life. But yeah, every time I go over there, I always think of him. But Eddie, it's been a joy, mate, as always.
Thank you very much for having me, Will. Thank you very much for having me. You know, you mentioned training with Guru to a Chris. If you do want to train with Guru to a Chris, the only way you can really do it is that we have 4 seasonal weekends camps in Lutterworth in Leicestershire. So if anybody wants to train Silat with us, you're more than welcome to if there's a link anywhere or to my site or Facebook or something. If you fancy it, then you're more than welcome.
We'll throw that in. And then the other last thing is, Eddie, when people want to train with you, because I know you're too selfless to say it, how can they get at you?
Well, they can get me on obviously on Facebook as Eddie Quinn, so have a look on there. And you've got my website, www.the-approach.com.
Perfect. Eddie, well, I'm going to go because I've got a date with Craig Revel Horwood. Not really, But you know where I'm coming from, and I know you'll be down there in about 2 minutes yourself. All right, mate?
I will be. Thanks again.
Brother.
See you soon.
No
Bye,
care,
Will.
bye-bye.
Bye, Mick. Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Take care, guys.
Hey,
Thank
Will.
you.
This podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.
If you're a maintenance supervisor for a commercial property, you've had to deal with everything from leaky faucets to flickering light bulbs. But nothing's worse than that ancient boiler that's lived in the building since the day it was built, 50 years ago. It's enough to make anyone lose their cool. That's where Grainger comes in. With industrial-grade products and dependable fast delivery, Grainger can help with any challenge, from worn-out components to everyday necessities. Call, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.